So a warm good morning to all of you. So I would like to welcome you all to the first session in the Governance Theory and Practice series organized by the Center for Governance, IMK. So the first session, as you know, would be on data-driven governance, catalyzing systemic changes. We have an eminent speaker from the field, Dr. Purnima Dore. She heads the data-driven governance portfolio of Tata Trust. So the key objective of the session is to blend academic theory with the praxis from the field. We have two eminent professors, academicians here. I'd like to welcome Dr. Rudra Sen Sharma. He's Dean Research, Innovation and Internationalization, IMK. And we have Professor Ramkumar Kakani. He's Head and Professor, Center for Governance, IMK. So just to, before moving on to the session, I may have a quick introduction to the general protocol. We'll have a curated question answer session subject to the time availability, and we encourage you to send your questions and queries to the coordinator's Zoom inbox. I hope we can just move on to the session. So I'd like to invite Dr. Rudra Sen Sharma to introduce Dr. Purnima Dore, the key speaker of the event. Professor, over to you, please.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce the speakers. I'm grateful to Mr. Hari Krishnan and Professor Ramkumar Kakani for letting me introduce the speaker and the session. So, in IIM Kozhikode, we have this Center for Governance as a platform through which we can deliver research that can translate into action to improve governance systems in the economy. So the approach is that of an interdisciplinary one, spanning areas such as leadership, management, political science, public policy, strategy, finance, etc. And the idea is to generate evidence-based research and then disseminate it so that there is an impact in larger society. And for that, the center tries to have conversations such as this one, collaborations with governments, policymakers, regulators, non-governmental organizations, corporate entities, and researchers. So as part of the conversation agenda, I think we have a wonderful speaker today, Dr. Purnima Dore. I have the privilege of introducing her. She is an economist and Tata Administrative Services professional. She heads the data-driven governance portfolio at Tata Trusts. She has experience in digital transformation and development finance. In fact, I was reading one of her interviews where she said that she believes in using data not just as a tool, but as a force for change, for meaningful change and transformation. So that is her work at Tata Trust, through which she has impacted economy and society in multifold ways. She has a PhD in economics from IIT Bombay, specializing in regional growth, development of cities, and access to skills, employment, and finance. And before that, she was a gold medalist when she graduated from XLRI Jamshedpur. With that, I welcome Dr. Purnima Dore and I hand over the virtual dais to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Professor Rudra, and it's a pleasure to be part of this discussion today. Thank you.
Purnima ma'am, I would like to start with the very broad question. What do you mean by governance? So in your understanding, or say from your experience of the field, from the field, what exactly is governance? How can you define governance? So for example, how dissimilar or similar is this in the way we understand what we call government? So we'd be interested in knowing your reflections in this regard.
Hari, the way I see it, I think governance is a term which has influence and impact on a number of sectors and areas. And to me, I would distill it down to the quality and the means of decision making. If it's good governance, it is good quality decision making. Bad governance is where it is, perhaps not meeting the principles of being unbiased, participative, etc. And so the nature of decision making, its finer quality is how I would, look at the term governance. I think it has relevance in a number of fields. Today, what we are going to talk about is, of course, more in the domain of public governance. But decision making in the corporate space comes under corporate governance. Within academia, the kind of decisions that get made, that has an element of governance to it. Self-governance, how individuals are taking calls for themselves within their homes, their families. So governance really is a large, all-encompassing kind of term. And it's different from government, of course, is where government is an institution, right? It's an institution, and it takes forms of course, local government, state, national, international. But the institution itself is what is governance, But governance is that quality of decision making which is largely institution agnostic and takes different forms and means depending on which institution we are talking about. So of course, aspects about participation, planning, innovation, etc., all of that come within that realm of governance. And if we also look at it, I think a lot of noted scholars have looked at this construct, and Rhodes has spoken about it. Kuhlman has a very interesting framework, and maybe we can, look at Kuhlman's framework and draw from it, where he, in his book in 2003, talks about, he breaks up the concept of governance into some interesting dimensions. One is he looks at the elements of governance. So what are the elements of governance if we look at it from the point of view of images? What are those underlying, assumptions or hypotheses or immediate even visual pictures that come to our mind when we talk about governance? If I had to, draw a parallel there, take something like our own electoral system. If democracy is a kind of an image that we have, where every last person is voting and they have that mark on their hand, that's what we think in our country at least of, what our electoral system is meant to mean. Then we have instruments, where Kuhlman talks about instruments from the perspective of, things that facilitate this process to lead to action. So we have an image or an ideal or an underlying hypothesis of what we think governance should be. And then there are a set of instruments which facilitate it, which could be in the form of information, which could be in the form of processes, etc., which lead us to certain actions. And those then form the elements of governance. Then there is this dimension of what are the structural aspects. So is it, what are the modes? Is it individuals governing themselves? Is it co-governance? Is it a hierarchical system which is telling you what you're supposed to do? And on another side, you have this thing called orders of governance, which is talking about, is it day-to-day processes? Or are we talking about higher order, choices or new innovative ways of decision making or processes that are getting introduced? And the third is meta, which is structural changes. So when NITI Aayog is coming out with a policy on something, or the Ministry of Rural Development is saying, this is how I want, our local decision making to happen. The Ministry of Panchayati Raj issuing certain guidelines, that would come under the theme of meta-gov. SEBI coming up with directives about how organizations need to operate, that would come under the theme of meta-gov. Mm-hmm. So I think in a sense, Kuhlman has given an interesting, overarching view of, how do we look at governance and how we can think about it finer as.
Yeah. Thank you for this wonderful account of Kuhlman's framework. So Professor Ram, if you want to make some point, then we can.
Yeah, just wanted to know, just wanted to kind of help us in terms of probably if we have to kind of look at governance, while governance you elaborated it, what does data have to do with governance? I would like a little more discussion on that, given your expertise out there?
So I think information is a very important element in this process of decision making, because one is you do it intuitively, you use your gut and you think, okay, I know this is what is right and this is what is going to work. But we do see that a large part of leadership decision making needs to evolve around the kind of information that comes up, whether it's at a higher leadership level or even at the local leadership. So the gaps that we see, one is this gap on, yeah, you can go back, stay there. Yeah. Gaps in the kind of information that we have arise with respect to access to clean water, limited healthcare. We can be in the previous slide, please. Yeah, you can stay there. So the gaps largely are related to, one, not understanding the entire problem. So you have players who come in, and these could be by way of social enterprises, these could be by way of philanthropy, these could also be in how the government is planning its own programs, or even the ability of a district collector or a municipal commissioner to have the full picture of why this gap in access is happening. And there we see certain practices where we are not factoring in local level needs. A lot of programs tend to be top down. Many of the government schemes are schemes that are designed in a way which are supposed to apply to the entire country, but we do know that we have so many regional differences. So how do those nuances get captured? How do you make certain things effective in location X versus location Y? So using information as a tool to be able to, come up with finer plans. And the third is there are certain operational roadblocks where, if you look at how the decision maker functions, it is a lot of them are in firefighting mode. So let's take typically the day of a DC or a municipal commissioner. They are actually like a very large CEO, right? Dealing with a very large geographical and functional mix of responsibilities. So our work largely has been with at the district level, at the city level, and at the state and the national level to help to understand that you don't have those governing tools that will help you prioritize. And this is feedback that we have got from many of these stakeholders also, that we would like to, but we have so much on our plate. And where is that centralized information tells us that, geography A needs greater focus, or these are the villages in my domain that need greater, emphasis. And so and from the trust point of view, we've been doing a lot of work across domains like education, health, livelihoods, etc., where we design and roll out programs. But at the end of the day, what any player like us does is a drop in the ocean, right? The government is the larger player. There are so many funds which are assigned to different activities. And so what we felt is it's valuable to invest in building the systemic capacity to prioritize, to make sure money is reaching the right pocket, to make sure budgets are better designed, and that the plans reflect what people of those villages or geographies really want to see. So our effort towards creating sustainable solutions has been in the systemic strengthening mode, which is why today, we felt it would be valuable to talk about catalyzing systemic change. Because what outside actors can do can be certain programs, projects, even very large initiatives. But at the end of the day, if we want to improve the way governance is happening at a country level, then better data, better tools, better technology for those decision makers is very important. And we find that in the last 10 years, the private sector has made a lot of use of these tools, right? So the interesting thing is that you can step out of your institution and find an Uber, and you know where the nearest cab is, and you can get to wherever you want to go to. But the DC cannot get out of and go into the block and know which Anganwadi has the Sevika and which ones don't.
Yeah, interesting. What you mean to say is right. So just to kind of interrupt here, what you mean to say is, in a private sector, whether it is Facebook or whether it is a corporate, they are able to extract data and mine it carefully and ensure that the final last mile delivery is done to the extent of whatever that last mile person, whether it is a customer or whether it is their own employee or any other stakeholder, is taken care of. Yet at the same time, in a giant organization, in the given case, what you are saying is the unit, if the unit is like a district, you mean to say within the district, it is nearly impossible for the collector to go ahead and interact and identify who's that particular person who needs, say, let's say some sort of an intervention, and that too by some Anganwadi worker. And which is where the role of Tata Trust data-driven governance probably comes into play. Am I correct the way I had understood it?
Absolutely. That's the exact analogy.
Perfect. Right. Questions are welcome from other friends, and if you keep messaging, we take it further. So
definitely.
Maybe you can continue the conversation. Sorry for interrupting.
So let's move to the next slide. So we've looked at our, this has been over the last 4 to 5 years. We started with this work in 2015-16, and what we have bucketed this into has been the need for technology-driven decision support systems, where we are helping to build either large data collection activities, building dashboards, building portals, etc., as well as helping with the process within the district to use that information for better planning. So to activate a data-reliant culture of decision making and doing certain proof of concept, so that we're demonstrating these benefits, that when you have the data, this is what it can tell you. So these are the schemes that you're able to drill down into and deliver better value. The second type of thing that we have realized while doing this is that capacity building of stakeholders is very important. That having the technology and putting those tools in place is all, is very important to do. But there are 2-3 kinds of stakeholders who need to be with you in the game. One is your frontline. So the person right down at the village level, if you want to do this at scale, you have to have people there who are slowly building these skill sets. And so what we have done, and I'll talk about it more a little later, but we've tried to do a process of training young people from the villages, from their geography, on data collection, on using tablets, on understanding the local priorities, so that they are then the input into the system. With information, they're going door to door, putting that together. So there has been a large capacity building story there of helping build capacities of people at the grassroots to collect information. And I would not view them as data collectors. We call them Delta champions. And they are really change makers on the ground who are able to now build an understanding of the village governance dynamics and what change is possible, what is not, and kind of advocate for that. The second kind of capacity building we've been looking at is this within government. So once these tools are ready and we've done some kind of handholding, then to take it forward, you really need people within the government to own those tools, to be able to understand how they can use this information, to not be dependent on a third party who will come and do it for you, but to gradually build those skill sets and to find a way for it to seep into the cycle. So roughly, we would have, I think, trained about over 500 people now within the government system across, some of these states where we are working. And for us also, it's been an iterative learning process to understand what are those, specific areas where capacity building is very important. So we've recently launched a course which is currently ongoing on the city side with the Smart Cities mission for capacity building of city data officers. Because now we do have a cadre at the smart city level within each city to look at data within the city. And so their capacity building within the municipal context also becomes very, very important. The third peg of our work has emerged as strategic partnerships. And why we've come to this is that this is a large puzzle, and it's not possible for any one player to resolve it. Me and my team, we come with certain skill sets to the table and we're able to put that together. But one good thing I think which Trust has is its ability to, be a forum which brings many stakeholders together, whether they are NGOs, civil society, We have good relationships with government. And we've also, I think, worked closely with many startup tech entrepreneurs to build some of these back-end systems. So, I find that having the right technology and having the right technology players with you helps you also to build an ecosystem of tech partners who are interested in this kind of a story. And they can have a run, which may be for the next, 10, 15 years, where they build their own business models around solutions like these. So, for example, we have a partnership with the e-government foundation where we've invested into municipal data systems, and they are plugging in those systems into different urban local bodies on things like grievance redressal, financial management, modules, technical modules which are important for the municipal SAP. Similarly, on the rural side, we've developed an application and the process called Delta. And Delta, I will break it up as data evaluation, learning, technology, and analysis. This is an acronym we actually came to much later. We started as, how do we use information for better decisions, and then built up this system. And now we are looking at how can we do localization of SDGs using tools like these. Because the SDG is another big governance concept which the UN system is trying to build across different countries. And so we feel that, linking up with some of those are very useful. Let's proceed to the next slide. I think I will talk about.
Let me just understand it. So what you're essentially trying to say is, using technology and using data, we probably ensure a more rational and logical decision making rather than go by heuristics or go by, you can say, irrational biases which human beings might be prone to have, whether they are elected officials or the administrative bureaucracy, whosoever it is. First. Second, what you are also trying to say is, by ensuring capacity building, you are ensuring that the efficiency levels and effectiveness both of the government in terms of their delivery of the last mile issues, which probably involve the last, you can say, smallest and the smallest of the person and the poorest of the person out there, is probably better done. Second, what I also understood is, using these strategic partnerships, what I really liked in the last slide was, using these strategic partnerships, you are also trying to say that Tata Trust and probably this particular framework is even aiming to influence the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, which probably the United Nations are having, and out of the 17 SDGs, maybe you're trying to intervene on a few of them out there, right? So that's what I could gather. So moving further, wanted to know a little more on these partnerships. Maybe one of them, one or two of them, if you could help us in elaborating.
Sure. So we've had a very interesting partnership with the Maharashtra government, where they launched this program called Village Social Transformation Mission, where 1,000 villages across Maharashtra, the idea was to place fellows in these to put out a challenge, give fellowship from the government side and place them across villages. And they roped us in. The trust also played a role to help them with the fellowship, but more so with the data framework, that the Delta framework, which I'd like to spend some time on immediately after this, to use it to both train the fellows on what they would do within the village, understand the village context, collect information, build village development plans, and they also use different private sector ESR funds as well as government funds to make some of those development plans happen across these villages. Another partnership that we have had has been with the NITI Aayog, where there is this large program called the Aspirational Districts Program. It's a pan-India benchmarking across districts, where districts are evaluated on their performance on health, education, and some of these parameters. And we came in with some elements of our Delta process to help on the on-ground validation of those parameters across these districts. So the idea has been to, use some of the approach that we're looking at, a data-driven approach, to both inform how some of these policy decisions are being made, but also to look at how can ideas like these get more scale and get embedded into some of these large scale programs, so that the use of information becomes something which, you know, is a must have in the way things move forward.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. So, was this the same, what you said, the Delta framework, was it the same framework which was used for the village social transformation project in collaboration with the district administrations in Maharashtra? And we would be happy to get more details on the framework. And how will you place this particular framework from the practice into what we came to know through Kuhlman's framework? Are there any instances where you can kind of place that this particular image was used as part of Delta framework? This particular instrument was helpful when we were working on the VSTF project. So we would be happy to know more about Delta framework, firstly, and secondly, how would you place it over Kuhlman's framework, and how can we kind of have a blend between these two? So does it complement each other, or are there instances where there are similarities between these two? So we'll be happy to know more. So please, ma'am.
Thank you, Hari. That's a great question, and I will spend a few minutes, I think, now explaining the Delta framework. Maybe let's move to the Delta framework itself, and how we started with this was to look at, can we develop a regional profile? You know, a lot of members of parliament and many other such stakeholders came to us saying that, you know, I want to make a change. I want to say invest my MP Lads fund. I want to, plan an intervention, but I want to understand what is my regional priority. And I don't have a data set today that I can rely on, which, you know, I can use meaningfully for that. So it started from there. And so if I have to, put from a framework point of view, what is Delta? Its full form is, so it is everything about information, right? Data, evaluation, learning, because you're using information to learn more and to act better, technology, and analysis. And we also thought Delta signifies incremental change, right? In calculus, we look at that small change which can be done and how we can use information, therefore, as an agent of change, and how we can even make our field people who are involved with these programs see themselves as agents of change. So that's the thinking behind Delta. What all is part of it? If you look at the left-hand side, the development of key indicators which are relevant in the local context. So we formulated a entire detailed set of questionnaires, and some of my colleagues worked very hard with the government administration to identify that if I have to make a regional profile, and this started with Vijayawada, and then moved on to in Maharashtra, Chandrapur, then Balasore, Odisha, Nuwa Mandi, Jharkhand. We tried this and evolved this. So what I'm sharing with you is a nuanced approach of where we have reached after 4-5 years of work. So we looked at developing a composite set of outcome indicators, which covers health, education, livelihoods, etc. Identifying performance benchmarks in consonance with the community. That, okay, do we want to, is housing important for you? And if saturation of PMAY scheme is important, then it will find a place in the framework. And data collection. So doing the homework of which parameters are important, building our questionnaires, and doing data collection on two counts. One is institutional, which is your Anganwadi, schools, maybe we can quickly go to the next slide, because that has the segment of the questionnaires that we looked at. And then we can come back to this one. Yeah. So we broke it up into village level surveys, which covered different parameters of infrastructure, land, connectivity, which is at the village level, what resources are there. Two is Anganwadi. What is the status of the Anganwadi? What is the status of the school? And what is the status of the health facility? So these were three important institutions that we planned to map. And the village overall, and then there was also a panchayat overall, which gives you a picture of a snapshot of what facilities are available, what is not available, and then a detailed household and individual survey. where we covered demographic details, education, state schemes. That's so comprehensively. This is about 100, 150 questions, which gives you a very deep picture. And wherever we ran these surveys, we did it of the household questionnaire and a complete institutional coverage. So I was saying that we identified this comprehensive information set along with government officials, and some of my colleagues worked very closely with them to identify what these need to be. And these are the building blocks of what goes into Delta. So we do a mix of both household level information collection, institutional information collection, and work closely with the local leadership to carry out your entire set of participatory rural appraisal exercises. So let's go back to the previous slide. So the process that we followed, now that these were the questions and these were the things we wanted answers to, a detailed planning with the government. So this was something that we did. We told the government that we will do this for you. This is not something we are doing for our institution. This is something which should be a public good for your decision makers to use better. And so you be a partner with us and you come out with the GR, issuing orders to all the administrative teams to be part of it. And the outcomes of these will be available to you and will be for you to use. So this was done in very close partnership with the government. What we then did, so I spoke to you about the finalization of questionnaires, etc. Then the next step here is to have community mobilizations and meetings in the village. That this is a village development plan will be the outcome. This whole process is not for us to write a research paper about it. It is for us to come out with a village development plan which reflects what you really want. And so we did transect work, we did selection of volunteers from the community. And so these were community volunteers who did the data collection. We didn't hire anybody from the outside to come and do this information. It was local people, and we have built training modules and SOPs also for the entire Delta process now, where we do a 5 to 6 day complete in-depth training on these questions which are important, on the tool, on the way in which you will do the survey, and on the institutional structures of the village. And then we come to the output. So once this process happens over a 2-3 month period in the village, and it happens simultaneously. So when we've done it across the entire block. In Maharashtra, we did it across 3 blocks and saturated the entire segment. And the member of parliament there was with us to, kind of bless the initiative and to take the onus that what comes out of this exercise, I will use my office to make sure that we act on these priorities. Because it's not fair to use public time and their input and their questionnaire time if you're not going to do something with it. So wherever we entered, we did it with the complete sign off from the authorities. So they are going to use what comes out from this exercise. So then the outcome of that takes the form of your village and household level dashboards, village development plans. There was some amount of data cleaning and analysis that our team did with our technical team, and coming up with the final plan. So this is this end-to-end process of identifying what is important to us, running all these tools, selecting people from the community, collecting that, and giving a prioritized village development plan is the end-to-end process of Delta. What does it give us? Village development plans for the smallest geographical units, and you can consolidate it. So you can do an aggregation, village to block, block to district, so that you can have drill downs. And the first time we did this, the output was in the form of reports. And then we realized that it's better to digitize it. So we've made it completely dashboard friendly. Yes, Professor Kakani.
I wanted to know which district you started with, just to kind of understand in Maharashtra, which district you started this initiative with.
So this started in Krishna district in
Andhra Pradesh.
And one of my colleagues, Paresh, he was actually based there for 2-3 months. While getting it done, we hired a local team. We got an NGO there involved. We worked closely with the administration. And similarly, we did this in Maharashtra, in Chandrapur. We did it very close to Jamshedpur in Nuwa Mandi as well, in partnership with Tata Steel. And recently we have done this across the whole corridor between the Tata Nagar and the Kalinga Nagar steel plant. And the reason why the corporate sector is interested in it is that to get a granular picture of your, stakeholders, and then if development planning can happen around that, this has good elements of a good baseline as well.
Right. So what you mean to say is that in Maharashtra, you are looking at Chandrapur district, and there are many initiatives which probably you are able to intervene there. And you've chosen these 3 to 4 different places, one in Jharkhand, one in Andhra Pradesh, and one in Maharashtra, to just illustrate to us the way these interventions happen, right? So I also wanted to know a little bit more on how things probably work at the field. That is, I would like to know how you probably take this further in terms of, let's say, how do you ensure that it is not misused by the private parties, and yet at the same time it is used by genuine parties within the district and also by Tata Trust to ensure that the digital and database governance out there are very nicely done. And there are a few participants who are raising their hands, so maybe we can probably have this small anecdotal or illustration out there using this particular thing, and then we move to that particular the way maybe we can probably move to a very quick wrap up and then move to the question and answer or something like that. But first, we would like to listen to you on how it is done at a granular level.
Sure. If we can move to the previous slide, I'd like to take, so Chandrapur, if we take the example of Chandrapur, where over 3 months, 48,000 households were surveyed. And what we did is, and now we have developed our own app also called Delta app for our internal. We are now starting to use it a lot within the trust also, to have certain, core things built into it, which helps data quality, which helps local language support so that the questions can be translated locally, to have time tagging and GPS tracking, and to have inbuilt data security so that, other players cannot, immediately access that information. And to your question also of, how do you ensure on the field the information comes in properly? Some things like time tagging and GPS tracking have been very useful, because that the volunteer went to that location and then uploaded that, information set. We have some things where they take a photograph of the family also and upload that. So that, this is authentic, this is bona fide, these people do exist, and that the effort to go and do that groundwork actually did happen. We also do now, and over time, we've learned to do those kind of systemic back checks and about, to check from time to time what kind of information is coming in. Do we need to nudge some of the volunteers to improve the quality or the time they are spending with the family? Those are things which we have been, spending a lot of time on to refine. Let's move to the next slide. So once we did this, the output, it looks like this. So we look at something which, say if this is for Patan. So understanding the current status. What are the Pakka houses for BPL households? How many? What is the plan telling us based on all this exercise? That there are 35 Pakka houses which need to be built now. Which Yojana is money available? What is the budget per unit, which is typically there? Those are things we have filled in at the back end to be able to, get reflected over here, so that the decision maker can quickly drill down and see that, okay, even if the DC is doing a visit to Patan or the block officer is going, they can do a quick drop down of this and see, okay, these are the open items. Now we have created the option also where updation of activities can be done, so that that out of the 20 items that were open, so many have, actually got missed. Process-wise, what we do is, and let's move forward. So this gives you a picture of what the output looks like. Let's quickly move ahead. And geographically also to pinpoint. So for example, if we are looking at which are the households where electricity has not been met, you can pinpoint which villages are in the green, which ones are in the red. And sometimes the DC of Chandrapur actually took up reviewing these on a regular basis and started putting pressure on the electricity department that why are these villages red? And before the next meeting a quarter from now, I want you to show me what did you do to move these villages from red to green. So these are some nudges, and I would look at these as instruments which help better action or better decision making, to take place. And then what we did was let's go back. Please. We did we looked at the fact that, okay, now we have these village development plans ready. Let's just move to the previous one. Now that we have these plans, in Chandrapur and in Balasore, we actually spent some more time with the administration and moved into an value-added space which we called Delta Plus. So once you have the VDP and we have handed it over to you, we actually worked closely with them to embed this into the system. What was the objective? Now that these village development plans are there, these gaps are identified, to work with the government to implement those VDPs. So this implementation of VDP segment is where we moved from Delta to Delta Plus. What were the elements here? To have intuitive dashboard related decision making. So training a lot of the administrative officials on using these tools. 2 is setting up a block and a district development committee where our own team people also had representation, and that was meeting once every month. We also placed certain CAS managers there on their projects. We placed certain interns there from time to time to work with the administration. We influenced the Chief Minister's Fellows program to also have 1 or 2 people there sometimes to work and build these things into the system. So that every month when the DC is reviewing, let us look at what we also did was the top 20 items in your VDP. Typically the VDP has a lot of items. So using the Gram Sabha, so the Gram Sabha is the forum for local decision making. It is constitutionally recognized. And so getting these village development plans presented in the Gram Sabha, getting the Gram Sabha to ratify the top 20, 30 items, and then doing the legwork to work with the administration so that they find budgets. So which of these top 20 items are there in the district budget? Can they be part of the budget next time if they are not there currently? And can a regular follow-up be there so that at least the top 20 items that the people have identified become part of what is the DC's priority also. So we use this to look at data, participative decision making, and how can that make these items come to the top of the pile of what the DC is looking at from a decision making point. So here is just a quick list of, if we look at the items that people had prioritized in Chandrapur, drip irrigation wells, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, you have the state employment guarantee scheme. So there was a lot of gap areas where we identified families that were eligible but had not yet received it. Either they didn't know enough about the scheme and had not applied, or they had applied but they got stuck in the process, or the state departments didn't know that these people, the point Professor Ram was making, that the state does not know that this is the person who has not got access. And interestingly, the state is also chasing targets to meet their numbers. So it helps them actually to be able to know, okay, where are those pockets where, I need to, immediately address. And it also does not allow people who are not eligible to use the bureaucratic system to make sure that the benefits are coming there, because they are not then going to feature into the system. So these are some of the what this shows is the kind of number of VDP action items which were there under that head, and as a result, how much money from the government system actually came in against those schemes. If I had to, look at how does this tie in with women's framework, I think a lot of what we do is if you look at the image is that yes, we are going with a hypothesis that decentralized planning is important. It's important for the people to have a voice, and it's important to be able to use the decision-making system to give people what they actually need, right? Instruments for us. So I'll give you an example. If the VDP is a village development plan is an important instrument, one of the things which our team did was to put the top 20 items, paint them onto the panchayat wall. So wall paintings were a very effective instrument where anybody coming in and out of the panchayat bhavan is actually seeing ki ye bhi cheezein hain. Have they happened? Have they not happened? You can have a much more meaningful conversation in the panchayat office which is not limited to, I am having this problem, right? You can actually talk about the larger issues which are there in the panchayat if those issues or those priorities are there up front. And action, of course, as I mentioned, processes like the district committee, the work to nudge closure of VDP, action items. Our kind of work, I think I would put it somewhere between second order and meta governance kind of activity, because the first order day-to-day running of activities anyway happens, but second order, which is system change, design change, and meta governance. How do you incorporate a data-driven thinking into ways like the aspirational districts program which Niti Aayog is running, or the kind of capacity building that we are doing with the smart cities mission? Those are things which are in the meta governance domain. And I do think I would see our role, I think this is a very important thing, the institutional context piece, which Koiman talks about, where you bring together actors of state, market, and civil society. I am a firm believer that each of these players has a lot of value to add in better governance. And so it's very important to have forums or to have opportunities for them to come together to solve some of these problems. So we've tried to bring in tech players, the government, ourselves, in some cases academia. And the idea has been to look at this as a knotty problem to solve, but with some amount of effort, you're able to, unravel some.
So wanted to kind of understand, wanted to probably, I think before I speak, maybe some question and answers, and Hari, you have anything?
Yeah, we have a question. So that there are two questions, in fact, and both the questions essentially points towards the same idea. So when we collect data, let's make it very simple. When we collect data, there are three concerns. There are three aspects which comes into the picture. One, transparency. Two, biases. And third, the ethical use of data. So the participants would like to know your thoughts on these three when you kind of do what data-driven governance or use data for governance purposes.
Yes. So I think on the transparency side, it has been very important for us to be very clear with the community at the upfront. Why are we doing this exercise? What will the information be used for? And to not use it for any purpose other than the delivery of schemes. So we are very careful. We see ourselves as a custodian of this data. We are not data users or consumers. We are the custodian of this data who are doing certain analysis, etc., and making that available to the government. But it's not that somebody can come and buy that data from us or any of that. We don't get into that story at all. We are here as a custodian of data. For us, this is more to use data as a proof of concept so that the government tomorrow can build in some of these systems in the longer term. That is one. Two is this thing about what was the second concern? One was ethical use of data.
Transparency, biases, and ethical use of data.
Bias is something I think we do try to build that into the data collector when we are, training them about at the point of collection, because a lot of bias does happen at the point of entry. So very, very intensive training around some of that is important. I wouldn't say we have cracked that entirely, because I think that we also realize when we are reviewing the data when it comes to us about certain things, corrective actions that need to happen. And what we do not do is run algorithms in the back end which does categorization, profiling. We don't do that because I don't think our systems today are at that level of thing to use it for AI and things like that. So we are looking at simple problems of village development planning, prioritization. We do not make the personal data available to anybody. We do not collect a lot of individually identifiable data also, because we want to be careful on those counts. On third is on the ethical use of data. So the purpose of it is very clear. It's not going to any marketers. We ourselves don't make it available to any of the Tata Group companies. It is specifically meant for development purpose, and we have reserved it. But it's tough. I think we are very hard-headed about some of it. Sometimes we are unpopular, but we need to take those stands because data is very, I think you have to be very careful with what you do with it. And data in the hands of a not very mature user, it can be very problematic. So sometimes we have to also educate or work with government when we are sharing the information with them saying that I will give you the aggregated picture, but if you're looking at the personal level data, then do you have those servers and those privacy built in on your systems to handle it with care?
What I understand is that there are probably ways and means wherein you intervene. So I think a couple of our participants have raised hands. So let us try to have their own queries from their own voices. In case if it is okay with you, maybe one or two of them.
Of course.
We have Ashwini Sharma raising her hand. Ashwini, please go ahead with your question.
Good morning, all. My question is that in last Saturday there was news in The Hindu. ASHA workers got the tablets where they put in the data from where the National Food Security Act, they'll get the PDS allocations. It worked fine in some villages where there is well network connectivity, but at the same time there are villages where there is no network connectivity, and due to that there is a lag of 2-3 months of getting the rations. So ASHA workers have to do like the tablets overburdened them. They have to manually put the data, and second on the tablet also, just because of the servers. So my question is, what is the governance aspect of data in the areas where there is no network connectivity? How can we pitch in the data driven governance? Because in villages surrounding the tier 1 cities get these benefits, but what about the remote areas, like where we need a governance? Like how can we ensure sustenance of governance over there? Thank you.
Yeah. So I think this is a classic case of, putting the cart before the horse, where the need for going digital has come before the tools to get digital are in place. And to my mind, I think people using digital tools is more of a second order intervention. The first order is where you need to have the technology, you need to have the network, and without having those in place, making it contingent that ration will come only if you go digital. It's not the right. It's a little bit of a switching off what should have been the priorities first. So I would go with a situation where you first pick network, you make it mandatory in those states or regions where your connectivity is very good. So we know for a fact states and pockets of Maharashtra, Gujarat, Andhra, they do have strong, solid connectivity. There are parts of Jharkhand, Bihar, we see the Northeast suffering a lot from very bad connectivity issues. So I think the regional equality story is very closely tied with the digital story. And you have to be practical in what you mandate. So I think there's a governance issue there where you have not thought through your program before trying to roll it out. You didn't settle the first order and you came directly to the second order.
Great. Are there any more questions from the participants?
Okay. I have a couple of questions also, and apart from that, I also see a couple of questions out there which have come on my message box. Mm-hmm. So one of the things which a participant is asking, I think the participant is Arya. He's asking essentially is what are the future you can say in the future, how do you expect this data-based governance and digital-based governance to pan out? Would it be, let's say, would it be kind of having a lot of interaction? Somewhere I think the person seems to be asking about how does it pan out in future?
Right. So one of the important things that we would like to see happen, which we've been trying to, lobby for, is to get the census to go digital. Because the point is that these activities that we are doing, it is superfluous if once the census goes digital and is done properly. Then, from a systemic side, maybe it is a little idealistic, but a process like that probably needs to happen once every 5 years rather than every 10 years, because the picture on the ground is changing very rapidly. So we've also had some discussions actually with the census office where we've shared some of these tools and approaches. And I do know that the census, for a fact, is planning to go digital. What will be important for them to ensure is that concerns around privacy, bias, and all of that are taken care of very actively while going down that route. The second is for very strong capacity building to happen within the government administrative system, because the data and technology story now is here to stay. If we want to make, and we have to think about it from the field perspective, what is going to make life easier for the Anganwadi worker? If we think of our system design from that perspective, chances are we will be able to use these tools to make their life simpler rather than make them feel that, oh, I have to fill up one more format. So those are some, pathways that I see as way forwards, and what we are also trying to push our stakeholders towards whenever we are engaging with them.
It reminds me of the controversy which probably happened when initially the Aadhaar-based, you can say KYC and Aadhaar-based data collection initiatives were triggered. There were a lot of, you can say, doubts and questions, and lack of trust was there. And slowly and steadily, probably it got built in there. And the question which seems to be coming from one Afreen and another Mukesh is, they're saying, what are the possible limitations in this particular, you can say, digital-based governance that you see, you can foresee, or you probably are seeing on the ground? One is, of course, the intent per se, which you have clearly described, and you also illustrated it. But you will agree that almost everything has some limitation or the other. So I think these people want to kind of, these guests want to know a little more about it from your field experience.
It is going to be very important for players in the digital space to move with a lot of empathy, because it is quite possible for algorithms to miss out the human element, particularly if we are looking at applying some of these in the development context. We're already seeing a lot of players come in with the ideas around AI for good. Facebook has its own thing. Google is trying to do something around it. And I think it's great that a lot of these tech players are coming into the story. However, what we also see is that sometimes in the rush to get things done and to go digital, are the checks and balances which are important getting built in? Are they being thought through? We need to understand that, open platforms are by themselves are not going to solve things. You need to make sure that they do follow those principles of fairness. I remember the whole debate which happened around net neutrality, and I think Aadhaar also by itself, I don't think it has killed all the demons around privacy and data security. So I think even Arogya Setu, I think they could have done a better job in communicating or even planning what the backend looks like and giving citizens that comfort while coming on to that application. So I think there is a lot to be done in these areas of data privacy by design. A lot of software, tech, and even many of you who will be going ahead to work in some of these corporations, every company is going to be looking at data as a very important asset. And so I think it's important for you to equip yourself with both the intent questions and answers and the operational dimensions of these, so that the solutions that we come up with are things that work for all and don't end up having ethical or bias-oriented questions. I think we need to invest enough time at the design stage to work these through and have the plans, or have at least the inclination to set them right if we come across bugs that we have not seen. Every software has bugs, but you should want to, find your way through it once you identify it.
Absolutely. This is something which has got a number of dimensions to be covered for an analysis. So I think it's 12:07, so we'll kind of conclude the session. So I would like to invite Professor Ram to have a quick account of how are we going to take this session forward. Are we going to have a second session on the same theme, or what is the Center for Governance plan in this regard? Professor Ram, please.
So, friends, I think first and foremost, let me take this opportunity to thank each one of you for being present. And I would also like to thank the IMK administration and all the people, including Hari Krishnan Verma and our computer center friends out there for helping in taking this further. But most importantly, I would like to thank the guest of honor out there, Dr. Purnima Dore. And without her kind of words and without her building these things into a very lovely framework out there, our understanding of this whole thing would have been, relatively speaking, questionable and hazy. And in that sense, ma'am, you did a great job, and probably you ensured that we understand it. But to take it further, given the time gap that is there, what we would like to do is maybe after, let's say, after a few months, probably we will have a webinar too with you, wherein we would take a person across a VDP and ensure that they probably understand the nuances of governance, data governance, and how a village development program and these village level initiatives, how they finally ensure and they go and get into a, you can say, very nice synergy with the district collector, and in that sense help the public governance and the institutions and the nation in that sense. So I'd like to take this opportunity to first thank you, and would like to assure you that we'd like to have more of your presence in the future. Thank you so much. Dr. Purnima, over to you, and then we'll close.
Thank you so much, Professor. It's been a great conversation today, and would be definitely, that's a great idea. We can do a very detailed VDP walkthrough and also show you what the Delta, do an in-depth thing into the Delta process as well. I think would be very happy to plan that out with you. And it's been a great conversation. Thank you, Hari, for your curation as well.
Thank you, friends. Thank each one of you. And we'd like to assure you that every month we'll come back and have a very nice kind of webinar out there and ensure that we all learn from each other. In case you have any suggestions on the topics that you would like to have these conversations around, and any guests you have in kind of mind, we're very happy to involve, and probably hope that they also contribute and they also kind of help the way Dr. Purnima Dore did. Thank you so much.